Eddie Van Halen was going through airport security at LAX carrying his guitar case when the TSA agent flagged it for inspection. The agent looked at the casually dressed traveler in jeans and a hoodie and asked the standard question, "What do you do for a living?" Eddie answered honestly, "I play guitar." The agent rolled his eyes and said sarcastically, "Yeah, and I'm Eddie Van Halen. Sir, I need a real answer for my report." Eddie smiled and said quietly, "Actually, that's exactly who I am." What happened in the next 60 seconds became one of the most legendary airport security stories in rock history. It was a Tuesday morning in June 2004, and Eddie Van Halen was catching an early flight from Los Angeles to Phoenix for a charity event. He'd packed light, just a carry-on bag and his guitar case containing one of his custom-built guitars. The guitar was irreplaceable, literally one of a kind, and Eddie never checked it as luggage. Too many horror stories of instruments being damaged in cargo holds. LAX was busy with the usual pre-work rush of business travelers. Eddie was dressed for comfort, jeans, a black hoodie, Nike sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low. He hadn't shaved in a few days. He looked like any other tired passenger trying to catch an early flight. The security line moved slowly. Eddie shuffled forward with everyone else, placing his carry-on and guitar case on the conveyor belt, emptying his pockets into a plastic bin. He walked through the metal detector without issue, but as he approached to collect his belongings, he noticed a TSA agent examining the X-ray screen with interest. Agent Marcus Williams had been working at LAX security for 7 years. He'd seen everything. Weapons disguised as everyday items, prohibited liquids, passengers trying to sneak all manner of contraband through security. He took his job seriously. When he saw the guitar case on the screen, something about the internal structure caught his attention. It wasn't a standard guitar. There were modifications, custom electronics, unusual configurations. "Sir," Marcus called out, "is this your guitar case?" Eddie walked over. "Yes, that's mine. I need to inspect it. Please step aside." Eddie moved to the inspection area, not concerned. This happened sometimes. TSA agents weren't guitar experts. Anything that looked unusual on the X-ray got flagged for manual inspection. Marcus pulled the guitar case off the conveyor and set it on the inspection table. "I'll need you to open this, sir." "No problem," Eddie said, reaching for the latches. "Wait," Marcus said, holding up a hand. "Before you open it, I need to ask you some questions for my report. What do you do for a living?" It was a standard security question. Understanding what someone did helped agents assess whether their luggage contents made sense. A photographer carrying camera equipment, a chef carrying knives, a musician carrying instruments. It all tracked. Eddie answered simply, "I play guitar." Marcus looked at the casually dressed passenger skeptically. The guy looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. Messy hair under a baseball cap, unshaven, wearing a hoodie like a college student. Marcus had seen plenty of aspiring musicians going through LAX, kids heading to Nashville or New York to chase dreams, weekend warriors flying to gigs, amateur players transporting instruments. "You play guitar professionally?" Marcus asked, his tone suggesting he doubted it. "Yeah," Eddie said modestly. Marcus glanced at the guitar case. It was a hard case, professional looking, but not particularly fancy. No tour stickers, no band logos, nothing indicating this was a successful professional musician's instrument. "What kind of guitar is inside?" "A custom one I built," Eddie said. "You built it yourself?" Marcus's skepticism deepened. In his experience, people who claimed they built instruments usually meant they'd assembled a kit or modified a cheap guitar. Professional musicians played expensive brand-name instruments, Fenders, Gibsons, Martins. They didn't show up with homemade guitars. "Yeah, I've been building my own guitars for years," Eddie said. Marcus wrote this down on his inspection form, then looked back at the passenger. Something about this didn't add up. The guy claimed to be a professional guitarist, claimed to have built his own custom guitar, but looked like he was flying budget airline to a weekend gig. "Sir, I need honest answers for my report," Marcus said firmly. "What do you really do?" Eddie seemed confused. "I really play guitar. That's what I do." "Right," Marcus said, his patience thinning. He'd dealt with plenty of passengers who gave smart-ass answers. "And I'm Eddie Van Halen. Sir, I need a legitimate profession for this inspection report. Are you employed? Student?" What's your actual occupation? There was a moment of silence. Eddie looked at the TSA agent with mild amusement. Actually, that's exactly who I am. I'm Eddie Van Halen. Marcus stared at him. The passenger's expression was completely sincere. No smirk, no indication he was joking. But this couldn't be serious. Eddie Van Halen was a rock legend, one of the greatest guitarists in history. He wouldn't be standing in a regular security line at LAX wearing a hoodie and sneakers, looking like any random traveler. Sir, Marcus said slowly, I don't have time for games. I need your real occupation. That is my real occupation, Eddie said patiently. I'm a guitarist. My name is Edward Van Halen. I go by Eddie. Marcus looked at the passenger more carefully. The guy did kind of look like Eddie Van Halen might look if Eddie Van Halen had just woken up and thrown on whatever clothes were handy. The long hair, the facial structure, the age was about right, but it couldn't actually be him. You're telling me you're the Eddie Van Halen, Marcus said. The Eruption, Eddie Van Halen, the Van Halen Band, Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, Eddie said simply. Do you have ID? Eddie pulled out his driver's license and handed it over. Marcus looked at it. The name read, Edward Van Halen. The photo matched the person standing in front of him. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He looked at the driver's license, then at Eddie, then back at the license. Oh my God, you're actually Eddie Van Halen. I tried to tell you, Eddie said with a gentle smile. By this point, other passengers in line had noticed something was happening. A few had started recording with their phones. One woman had recognized Eddie and was whispering excitedly to her companion. Marcus's face had gone red. I am so sorry, Mr. Van Halen. You look so, you're just standing in the regular line like a regular person, Eddie finished. That's because I am. I'm just a guy who plays guitar and needs to catch a flight. But I said, Marcus realized what he'd said. Yeah, and I'm Eddie Van Halen, as a sarcastic dismissal. To the actual Eddie Van Halen. I literally said I was you, to you, while you were telling me who you actually are. Eddie laughed. I thought that was pretty funny, actually. Another TSA supervisor had noticed the commotion and walked over. Everything okay here, Marcus? Marcus looked at his supervisor helplessly. Sir, this is Eddie Van Halen, the real one. And I told him. I said, he couldn't even finish the sentence. The supervisor looked at Eddie, recognized him immediately, and turned slightly pale. Oh, Mr. Van Halen, we're very sorry for any inconvenience. No inconvenience, Eddie said easily. Marcus is just doing his job. The guitar case looked unusual on the x-ray, so he flagged it. That's exactly what he should do. Still, the supervisor said, we apologize for any disrespect. There wasn't any, Eddie said. He didn't believe I was who I said I was. That's fair. I'm dressed like I'm going to the grocery store. Why would he think I'm Eddie Van Halen? Marcus had found his voice again. Would you mind if I still inspect the guitar? I know you're you, but I did flag it for inspection, and… Absolutely, Eddie said. Let's open it. Eddie unlatched the case and opened it, revealing his custom-built guitar. It was immediately obvious this wasn't a normal instrument. The famous red, white, and black striped pattern, the custom pickups, the modified body shape. This was one of Eddie's signature guitars, the kind that appeared on album covers and in music magazines. Holy, Marcus whispered. That's the actual guitar, the one from the photos. One of them, Eddie said. I've built a bunch over the years. This is my travel guitar, a little more durable than some of my others. A small crowd had formed at a respectful distance. Passengers who'd recognized Eddie or who'd figured out what was happening from the excitement. Someone was definitely recording video. Marcus looked at the guitar with awe, then remembered he was supposed to be inspecting it for security purposes. He composed himself professionally. I need to check for prohibited items, Mr. Van Halen. Of course. Marcus conducted the quickest, most careful inspection of his career, gently checking the guitar case's compartments while trying not to damage anything. It was clear within seconds that there was nothing prohibited, just a guitar, some picks, and a spare set of strings. Everything's clear, Marcus said, stepping back. Eddie carefully closed the guitar case and latched it. Thanks for being thorough. I appreciate people taking security seriously. Mr. Van Halen, Marcus said, I need to apologize again. What I said, Yeah, and I'm Eddie Van Halen. That was incredibly disrespectful. It was funny, Eddie corrected. You thought I was giving you a hard time. You responded with sarcasm. That's normal human interaction. Don't apologize for being human. The supervisor interjected. We'd like to offer you expedited screening for your return flight, Mr. Van Halen. TSA pre-check priority. It's the least we can do. Eddie shook his head. I appreciate it, but I'll just go through regular security like everyone else. I don't need special treatment. But after this incident, there was no incident, Eddie said firmly. Marcus did his job correctly. He saw something unusual. He asked questions. He verified my identity. He inspected my belongings. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. The fact that he didn't recognize me is not a problem. It's actually kind of nice. Marcus looked confused. Nice? Yeah, Eddie said. I travel a lot. Usually when people recognize me, it becomes this whole thing. Photos, autographs, conversations, which is fine, I don't mind. But sometimes it's nice to just be a normal person standing in line. You treated me like a normal person. That was refreshing. I told you weren't who you said you were, Marcus pointed out. You were being skeptical of someone making an unlikely claim, Eddie said. That's good security practice. If someone came through saying they were the president, you wouldn't just believe them without verification, right? Same principle. Marcus thought about that. I guess that's true. Eddie picked up his guitar case. Can I give you some advice? Of course, Mr. Van Halen. The next time someone comes through with unusual equipment and tells you what they do, maybe keep an open mind. Not everyone who's good at something looks the part. I've met brilliant doctors who looked like teenagers, successful lawyers who dressed like skateboarders, award-winning writers who could barely speak English. People are surprising. I'll remember that, Marcus said sincerely. One of the passengers who'd been watching called out, Eddie, can we get a photo? Eddie looked at Marcus and the supervisor. Do you guys mind if I take a few photos before I go to my gate? I don't want to hold up the security line. The supervisor quickly directed Eddie to an area off to the side where he wouldn't block the flow of passengers. For the next 10 minutes, Eddie took photos with TSA agents and passengers, signed a few autographs on boarding passes and phone cases, and answered questions about his guitar. Marcus stood to the side, still processing what had happened. His colleague, another TSA agent named Sarah, nudged him. Dude, you told Eddie Van Halen that you were Eddie Van Halen. I know, Marcus groaned. That's going to be a legendary story at LAX. I know, Marcus repeated. When the small crowd had dispersed and Eddie was gathering his things to head to his gate, Marcus approached one more time. Mr. Van Halen, can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you get upset? Most people, when a TSA agent doesn't believe them or gives them attitude, they get angry. They demand supervisors. They complain. You just rolled with it. Eddie shrugged. Getting angry doesn't solve anything. You were doing your job. I've learned that life's too short to get mad about small stuff. You thought I was messing with you. You responded accordingly. We cleared up the misunderstanding. Everything's fine. Why would I be upset about that? Most famous people would have been, Marcus said. Then maybe they're famous, Eddie said, but they're not happy. I'd rather be happy. Eddie extended his hand. Marcus shook it, slightly stunned. Thanks for keeping us safe, Eddie said. Seriously, I know TSA gets a lot of complaints, but you guys do important work. I appreciate it. With that, Eddie Van Halen picked up his guitar case and carry-on bag and walked toward his gate, just another passenger trying to catch a flight. The story of Marcus Williams and Eddie Van Halen at LAX spread quickly through TSA circles, then into the wider world via the videos passengers had posted online. The security footage of Marcus saying, "Yeah, and I'm Eddie Van Halen," to the actual Eddie Van Halen became briefly famous on social media. Marcus gave an interview later to a music blog. It taught me not to make assumptions based on how people look. Eddie Van Halen didn't look like what I expected Eddie Van Halen to look like, so I didn't believe him. That was my mistake. He was incredibly gracious about it. The guy's a legend, but he acted like a normal person. That impressed me more than his guitar playing. The blog asked, did he really say life's too short to get mad about small stuff? He did, Marcus confirmed, and honestly, that stuck with me. I deal with frustrated passengers every day. Some of them have real reasons to be upset. Missed connections, lost luggage, real problems. Others get angry about tiny things. Eddie had a legitimate reason to be annoyed. I literally didn't believe he was who he said he was. And he just laughed it off. That's class. When Eddie Van Halen died in 2020, Marcus Williams posted a tribute on social media. In 2004, I told Eddie Van Halen that I didn't believe he was Eddie Van Halen. He could have been angry. He could have demanded special treatment. Instead, he taught me a lesson about humility, about not judging people by their appearance, and about staying calm when life gets absurd. Rest in peace to a guitar legend who was an even better human being. If this story moved you, subscribe and share. Have you ever not been believed when you were telling the truth? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments.